Welcome to Courage in the Darkness with your host, Phillip Roberts. It's time to awaken America, y'all. Let's get into it.
You know, not too long ago in America, a single paycheck could buy a home, raise a family, and even leave a little extra for a rainy day. My grandparents, and maybe yours, lived in a world where one breadwinner could support an entire household. Families ate dinner together every night, churches were full on Sundays, and communities looked out for each other. Somewhere along the way, that shifted. Two hard-working adults often feel like they're running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up, barely scraping by while juggling bills, kids, and a mountain of stress. It's not just about numbers on a paycheck. It's about what we value as a culture and what we've quietly given up without realizing the cost. This isn't a blame game episode. I'm not here to pit men against women or dismiss the incredible contributions of women in the workplace, but we need to have an honest conversation about why the American dream now seems out of reach for so many families and what that says about where we are as a nation. Tonight, I'm going to pull back the curtain on how we got here. From the economic shocks and cultural shifts that turned two incomes into a necessity, to the pressure this places on parents, children, and faith life. We'll also talk about what can be done, not through outrage or despair, but through practical steps, renewed priorities, and a faith-centered perspective. Let's dig in and look honestly at how the two-income trap took hold of America and what it's really costing us. The shift didn't happen overnight. It started in a post-World War II boom. The 1950s and early 60s were a time when one income could cover a mortgage, food, and a family vacation. There was a cultural expectation that a stable job and a bit of discipline could build a future. A single breadwinner, typically the father, could provide for his family with dignity. The mother stayed home, raised the children, managed the household, and was the backbone of family stability. By the 1970s, cracks were forming. Inflation started to climb. The cost of housing and education crept up faster than wages. Factories closed or moved overseas, gutting the communities. American manufacturing was the backbone of the middle class, and it was being shipped to China and Mexico, where the labor was cheap and regulations were minimal. At the same time, there was a cultural push for more consumer spending, bigger homes, nicer cars, and more stuff to signal success. Here's where it gets interesting. As more women entered the workforce, not just for fulfillment, but out of necessity, family finances began to adjust. Two incomes felt like a blessing at first. Families could afford more, save more, and provide extras their parents never had. But the market adjusted too. Sellers, landlords, and banks realized families had twice the money, so prices rose accordingly. What was once a choice became a requirement. Over time, two incomes became the new baseline, just to stay afloat. Thinking about housing. A three-bedroom home in the suburbs that once cost a single teacher's salary now required two professionals working full-time. College tuition followed the same pattern, exploding in cost because families had access to more money through dual incomes and student loans. And as costs climbed, debt became normalized. Credit cards, student loans, car payments, medical bills. Families traded financial security for survival on credit. The government played a role too. Tax policies, welfare structures, and economic incentives were designed around the assumption that both parents would work. Stay-at-home parents lost economic value in the eyes of the policymakers. Meanwhile, corporations pushed for cheaper labor overseas while demanding more productivity from American workers for stagnant wages. And this isn't just an economic story. It's a cultural one. The family dinner table got emptier as work hours stretched longer. Churches saw attendance drop because Sunday mornings became catch-up time or a second job. Kids started spending more time in daycare or after school programs than with their own parents. Not because parents didn't care, but because the system left them no choice. This cultural shift changed the way we teach our kids about priorities. Instead of building a life around faith, family, and community, we've been pressured to build around careers, income, and image. And many families, especially those in the middle class, feel trapped. They're working harder than their parents ever did, yet somehow falling further behind. This isn't nostalgia for some perfect past. The past had its flaws, but we've got to be honest about what was lost: stability, time together, and a sense of shared purpose that money alone can't replace. We traded the American dream for the American treadmill. Let's be honest, when both parents have to work full time just to keep a roof over their heads, something's got to give. And too often, what gives is the very thing family needs most: time. Think about a typical weekday for a two income household. Mom and dad are out the door before sunrise. Kids get dropped off at daycare or school early, often before they're even fully awake. They spend 8, 9, sometimes even 10 hours in institutional care with strangers raising them. Dinner is often fast food or it's microwaved because everyone's exhausted. Homework gets squeezed in between chores and maybe a little screen time. By the time heads hit pillows, there's been little real connection, no long conversations at the dinner table, no relaxed family devotionals, no chance to just be together. Children notice. They may not say it outright, but they feel when parents are distracted or absent. Teachers report more behavioral struggles and attention issues. Counselors see anxiety and loneliness, even in young kids. We're raising a generation that's materially provided for, but emotionally starved. They have the latest phones and gaming systems, but what they really want is their parents' time and attention. And spiritually, when Sunday morning rolls around, a lot of families are wiped out. Church can start to feel more like an obligation in an overbooked schedule. It's not that people don't care about faith. It's that they're so exhausted from the week that they barely have energy left for anything beyond survival mode. It's not just about church attendance, it's about what's being modeled. If kids only see faith practiced when it's convenient, they absorb that message. Training takes time and presence. But in today's culture, parents are often left with so little of either. You can't discipline your children if you're never around them. You can't pass down values and wisdom in 15-minute increments between soccer practice and bedtime. Marriage also takes a hit. Two full-time jobs means more stress, more opportunities for conflict, and less emotional energy for each other. Studies show that financial strain and overwork are among the top contributors to divorce. Even strong couples can start to feel like roommates managing a household rather than partners building a life together. Date nights become rare. Intimate conversations get replaced by logistics about who's picking up the kids or paying which bill. Another impact is community involvement. Decades ago, families knew their neighbors, volunteered at school or church, and looked out for one another. Your neighborhood was your social safety net. Now, the two income grind leaves little room for those connections. People don't know who lives three houses down. They're too busy surviving to build community. And when community ties weaken, families lose their safety net. Those relationships that used to help in hard times or keep people grounded. Here's something else we don't talk about enough: the impact on mothers specifically. Women are often carrying a double burden: full time work and the majority of household management, despite decades of equality studies consistently showing that working mothers still do more childcare, more housework, more emotional labor than their husbands. They're exhausted, guilty, and stretched beyond their limits. This isn't what liberation looks like. And let's address the elephant in the room: daycare. We've been sold the idea that daycare is just as good as parental care, that the professional childcare workers can provide what mothers naturally provide. But that ain't true. Study after study shows that children thrive best with consistent parental attachment, especially in the early years. There's no substitute for a mother's presence. Institutional care, no matter how well meaning, cannot replace the bond between parent and child. The two income trap isn't just an economic problem, it's a spiritual one, too. It pressures families to trade presence for provision, faith for finances, and community for convenience. And many parents feel guilt they shouldn't even have to carry. They're doing what they have to do to keep food on the table. The problem isn't a lack of effort, it's a culture that tells us constant hustle is the only way to survive. Here's the spiritual reality we can't ignore: a busy life doesn't always equal a full life. If all our treasure, our time, energy, and priorities is consumed by survival in a broken system, our hearts drift. Even with the best intentions, faith becomes something we fit in rather than the foundation of our lives. To understand why so many families are trapped in the two income cycle, we need to look at the economic and cultural forces that pushed us here. This isn't about blaming parents, it's about seeing the bigger picture and calling out the systems that profit from our exhaustion. Let's start with inflation and the rising cost of living. Housing prices have skyrocketed in many markets. They've tripled or quadrupled in just a generation. Healthcare is getting expensive and it's getting worse. Childcare costs are crushing. In some states, full time daycare for one child costs more than college tuition. A home that might have been affordable on a single income 50 years ago often requires both parents to work today. Even middle class families find themselves stretched thin, paying for mortgages, utilities, food, transportation, and school fees, while hoping there's enough left over for savings. And spoiler alert, there usually isn't. Inflation doesn't just raise costs, it compounds stress. When every year feels like a battle to keep up, families make decisions not because they want to, but because they have no other choice. They sacrifice time together to survive financially, and it's not just low income families. Millions of households that once could manage on one income, now feel trapped, overworked, and overwhelmed. But here's what really drives me crazy is that wages haven't kept pace with inflation. Corporate profits are at record highs, CEO compensation has exploded, yet the average American worker's wages have barely budged in real terms over the past 40 years. The wealth is being generated, it's just not going to working families. It's going to the executives, the shareholders, and the investor class, while the regular people work themselves to death just to tread water. Cultural shifts have reinforced this. Since the 1970s, social expectations changed. Women were encouraged to pursue careers, which can be empowering, but the narrative also framed dual incomes as a necessity and a moral good. Suddenly, being a good parent or a successful adult seemed tied to both parents working, even if the family would have been better served with one parent at home. Stay at home mothers went from respected to dismissed. Homemaking became devalued. The media and government programs subtly support this. Tax policies, social safety nets, and consumer culture create pressure to earn more and spend more. And let me be clear, I'm not saying that women shouldn't be allowed to work. That's not the point. The point is that we've created a system where they have no choice. The option to stay at home and raise your own children has been economically stripped away from most families. That's not freedom. That's economic coercion dressed up as empowerment. Technology plays a role too. Phones, social media, and constant connectivity make it harder to separate work from home life. Even after the office lights go off, emails, Slack messages, and Zoom meetings can pull parents away from family moments. This omnipresence of work blurs boundaries and chips away at what should be sacred time: mealtime, bedtime routines, and weekend family activities. You're never really off anymore. Work follows you everywhere. Another factor is changing workplace culture. Many companies expect long hours, constant availability, and relentless productivity. A parent working from home may technically be present, but often still feels distracted by work obligations. The expectation that families must constantly earn and produce creates stress that trickles down to children, who may feel emotionally neglected even in the same room. Corporate America has figured out how to squeeze more productivity out of fewer people. They've normalized the 50, 60, 70-hour work week. They've made hustle culture seem admirable instead of exploitative. And they've convinced us that work life balance is a personal responsibility rather than a structural problem they've created. The shift also impacts faith life. When work dominates schedules, church attendance, youth group involvement, and family devotion time take a back seat. If parents don't have time or energy to model faith consistently, children may grow up without grounding in spiritual truth. We're raising a generation that doesn't know scripture, doesn't understand Christian values, and doesn't have a relationship with God. Not because the parents don't care, but because they literally don't have time to teach them. It's important to note that these economic and cultural pressures don't exist in isolation. They feed each other. Higher costs push parents to work longer hours. Longer hours limit time for family and faith. Limited family time affects children's development and spiritual grounding, and the cycle repeats, often without parents even realizing how trapped they are. Now, consider policy decisions and corporate influence. Wages for many working class Americans have stagnated for decades, while costs for essentials like housing, healthcare, and education have skyrocketed. Government programs often target assistance in ways that unintentionally encourage two incomes: child care subsidies, tax breaks for working parents, and employer incentives. They're subsidizing the problem instead of fixing it. Meanwhile, corporations market convenience, debt, and consumerism, keeping families dependent on money, schedules, and endless work hours. They want you tired, distracted, and consuming. They profit from your exhaustion, and the government enables it through policies that benefit corporations over families. Here's what really gets to me. We've got a tax code that punishes single income families. A married couple with one earner making $100,000 a year pays more in taxes than a married couple with two earners making $50,000 each. The system literally penalizes the choice to have a parent at home. That's deliberate. That's policy designed to force both parents into the workplace. All these forces together create a system where it feels impossible to thrive as a single income household. Families aren't failing morally. They're navigating a structure stacked against one parent earning. And yet, it's worth asking, is survival enough? Or are we sacrificing something deeper? Time with our children, community engagement, spiritual growth, and family cohesion just to keep up with the system? The key takeaway is that this isn't just a financial struggle, it's a cultural and spiritual one. If we want to reclaim family life, we have to understand these pressures fully and be willing to call them out. We need legislative reform. We need tax policies that support single income families. We need to push back against corporate exploitation. And we need to rebuild a culture that values motherhood, fatherhood, and family stability over GDP growth and corporate profits. So now that we've unpacked the pressures of pushing families into the two income trap, let's turn to solutions. These aren't abstract ideas, they're practical steps parents can take to reclaim time, strengthen faith, and restore balance in their homes. It won't be easy, and it requires sacrifice, but it's possible. First, let's talk about intentional budgeting. It's not glamorous, but understanding where every dollar goes is the first step to independence. Families who track income and expenses can often find areas to cut back. Unnecessary subscriptions, frequent dining out, or oversized housing costs. Do you really need that $1,500 mortgage, or could you live in a smaller home for $900? Do you need two car payments, or can you drive used cars paid in cash? Small changes can free up funds, allowing one parent to consider staying home or working part time without plunging the family into financial instability. And let me be honest, this requires sacrifice. You might have to drive an older car, you might have to skip vacations for a few years, you might even have to say no to things your friends are doing. But what's the alternative? Working yourself to death while strangers raise your kids? That's not a life. That's slavery with a salary. Next, consider lifestyle simplification. Consumer culture pushes us to spend more to feel successful. But living below your means isn't just about money, it's about freedom. Choosing smaller homes, fewer gadgets, and simpler routines can reduce the need for dual incomes. It's a conscious shift away from materialism toward family centered living. This is countercultural. Your neighbors might judge you, your coworkers might not understand. Social media will make you feel like you're failing because you're not posting vacation photos or showing off new purchases. Ignore it. Those people are slaves to debt and image. You're building something real. Work life balance is critical. For parents who must work, boundaries matter. Setting clear start and end times, turning off devices during family meals, and protecting weekends for shared activities can prevent work from dominating home life. Even small gestures, reading a bedtime story, attending a soccer game, or simply having dinner together, strengthen bonds and model faith and values for children. If you're working for an employer who demands constant availability, you need to have a hard conversation. Set boundaries. Say no. If they won't respect your family time, find another job. I know that's easier said than done, but your children's souls are worth more than any paycheck. Faith centered living is another cornerstone. When work schedules consume life, intentional carving out time for prayer, scripture study, and church involvement anchors the family spiritually. That inheritance isn't only financial, it's moral guidance, faith, and resilience. Teaching children these principles daily ensures the next generation is equipped to make wise choices, regardless of economic pressure. Make Sunday sacred again. protect it. Don't let sports leagues or work obligations steal that day from your family and from God. Church isn't optional. Family devotions aren't optional. These are foundations that keep your household grounded when everything else is chaos. Community support can't be underestimated. Families who invest in church groups, neighborhood networks, or mutual aid organizations often discover ways to reduce costs, share responsibilities, and create social and spiritual connections that work alone can't provide. You don't have to navigate this alone. A strong community can offer both practical help and moral encouragement. Find other families who share your values. Build relationships with people who support your choices instead of undermining them. Trade childcare, share meals, help each other out. This is how communities used to function, and it's how we need to function again. Another key step is evaluating career paths strategically. Sometimes a career that pays more but requires long hours isn't the best choice for a family's well-being. Parents can explore opportunities that offer flexibility, remote work, or shorter commutes. Options that may reduce income slightly but increases quality time and reduces stress. Consider entrepreneurship or side businesses that allow more flexibility. Maybe one parent can work part time or run a business from home. Maybe you can find ways to generate income that don't require sacrificing your family life. This takes creativity and effort, but it's worth exploring. Adopting a long term mindset is essential. It may take several years to transition to a single income household or a more balanced schedule, but setting goals, saving strategically, and planning for the future creates options rather than feeling trapped. Every small step counts towards reclaiming freedom and preserving a family's spiritual and emotional health. Pay off debt aggressively. Every dollar you owe is a chain keeping you in the system. Credit card debt, car loans, student loans, these are tools of enslavement. Attack them with intensity. Live on rice and beans if you have to. Freedom is worth temporary discomfort. Finally, open communication within the family is vital. Discussing finances, responsibilities, and values openly helps children understand the family's choices and fosters maturity. It also ensures both parents are aligned in priorities, making it easier to sacrifice together without resentment. Your kids need to understand why you're making different choices than their peers' families. Teach them about debt, about priorities, about what really matters in life. They might not appreciate it now, but they will when they're adults. The underlying principle here is choice, true choice. When families are financially and spiritually anchored, they can make decisions that prioritize faith, children, and quality of life over societal pressure or material accumulation. It's not easy, but it's possible, and it's worth it. As we wrap up, it's worth reflecting on the bigger picture. The two income trap isn't just a financial problem, it's a cultural and spiritual one. When families are stretched too thin, children miss out on guidance, faith, formation, and the kind of everyday mentorship that shapes character and resilience. Reclaiming the family life isn't about rejecting work or ambition. It's about choosing priorities that honor God, protect children, and build generational stability. That inheritance isn't only financial, it's the wisdom, values, and faith that get passed down when parents intentionally invest time and presence into their children. The ripple effects are profound. Children who grow up in households with strong parental presence are more likely to succeed academically, socially, and spiritually. They learn work ethic, compassion, and faith firsthand. When parents model balance and integrity, those lessons become part of the family legacy, impacting not just the immediate generation, but generations to come. Think about what you're actually building. Are you building a career? Are you building a retirement account? Or are you building human beings who will carry your values forward? Your children are your legacy. Your grandchildren will be shaped by the choices you make today. What you invest in them, time, wisdom, faith, will echo through generations. Choosing family over convenience requires courage. It may mean downsizing, changing careers, or setting firm boundaries at work. It may mean saying no to societal pressures that equate worth with income or possessions. But the rewards, stronger relationships, deeper faith, and healthier children far outweigh the sacrifices. Cultural shifts take time, but every family that makes intentional choices to prioritize children, faith, and quality of life pushes back against the societal currents that undervalue home, virtue, and moral responsibility. These choices become a quiet form of activism, living by example in a world that often celebrates the opposite. You're not just making decisions for your household, you're making a statement about what matters. You're demonstrating to your community, your church, and your children that family is worth protecting, that faith is worth prioritizing, and that the rat race isn't worth winning if you lose your soul in the process. Finally, remember that these decisions aren't made in isolation. Church communities, trusted mentors, and supportive networks all help sustain families as they navigate financial and societal pressures. Seek guidance, share experiences, and celebrate small victories along the way. The long term impact is clear. When families reclaim their time, focus on faith, and invest deeply in their children, they leave an inheritance that extends far beyond money. They leave a legacy of strength, wisdom, and moral grounding. That's the true power of intentional family life. That's the kind of legacy that honors God and prepares the next generation to thrive spiritually, emotionally, and culturally. Let's commit to living courageously, prioritizing our families, and walking in faith. This isn't just about surviving the pressures of modern life. It's about thriving and leaving a lasting positive mark on our children, our communities, and our country. I want to leave you with one verse that captures everything we've discussed today. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." That inheritance isn't just about money. It's not about how big your house is or how much is in your 401k. It's about legacy, stability, faith, and wisdom passed down through generations. It's about raising children who know God, who understand sacrifice, who value family over possessions, and who will carry those values forward to their own children. The two income trap has stolen that from millions of American families, but it doesn't have to steal it from yours. You have choices. They're hard choices, and they'll require sacrifice, but they're worth it. Your children are worth it. Your marriage is worth it. Your faith is worth it. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Talk about these issues with your spouse, your church, your community, and make the intentional choice to prioritize what actually matters. If you found this episode helpful, please share it, like it, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations. And if you found value in what I'm doing or want to support this work, consider becoming a member on Patreon at Courage in the Darkness, where you can find even more content. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. God bless.